site. So what that does is it gets you all jobs when you graduate. It's like very similar to a dating site where you just fill out a profile and you match with jobs, and then you get to see which ones are appropriate for you. So we're hoping that you will all join as soon as possible, because no matter where you are in your dental career right now, you're going to wind up needing jobs. And it's never too soon to start looking. So if you go to www.doccupations.com, use promo code ESSCARES, and that will give you a free tip. And that is courtesy of Dr. Studley. So I'm going to give you a very brief bio of what we did academically, which was we were both group practice at New York University. We retired from teaching 2 years ago. And in addition to being a group practice director, Dr. Studley was also the director of practice management and the director of ergonomics. Practice management was a 70-hour course that spanned from D2 to D4. So he has a lot to say on a lot of things. I have a master's and a PhD in higher education, so every now and then I just chime in with something that I think is relevant. And for today, what we're going to be talking to you about is what to look for in an employment contract. And before we get started, I just do want to repeat that thanks courtesy of Dr. Studley, please use promo code ESSCARES at www.doccupations.com. So we're going to be talking about what employment contracts should and should not include, what some pitfalls are that we want you to avoid, and how to negotiate. And a lot of you have written in questions, and we really do appreciate that. We'd like that to keep coming. So what I do want to say is there's a lot of material in this lecture. We have 1 hour, and a lot of those questions will be covered. So let's try to go through the lecture, and then if we have time at the end, we're going to get to as many of your questions as we can.
Great. So I always have to start off with a disclaimer, which just means everything that we're discussing today, and especially because we're going to be talking about contracts and other legal issues, these are the views of myself and Dr. Peltz, and highly recommend that you get the proper counsel and the proper advice. You know, my expertise comes from 35 years being a practicing dentist, an academic dentist, and also a business and insurance advisor. So all of those years, and I'm not ashamed to say the mistakes that I made when I first started my career, and probably so many of our other colleagues, hopefully this will help prevent you guys from falling into these same kinds of things. You know, we had looked at your website and we saw you have a couple of those that will be presenting to you. So this will really tie into everything, and we'll discuss that as well. So one of the first things that I'm always asked, well, do I need a contract? Well, first of all, you may not have that decision. So depending on when you go for your job interview, they will say, you know, here's an employment contract. They're going to give you a contract. You might go to a job interview, and instead of an employment contract, they're going to give you an employment agreement. And I'll discuss all of these differences. Also, depending on your status. Now, on the last presentation, we talked about like preparation for employment and being an employee or a 1099 independent contractor. That has to do with the type of contract that you're going to get as well. If you are a W-2, a true employee, you will get a contract. As an example, if you do a residency after you graduate, you will get an employment contract. You will be a W-2. As a W-2 employee, your contract will be much stricter than if you received a contract as what we had mentioned last time, an independent contractor, or in some states it's called at will. I'll explain what the differences are. You may not have the choice. Some jobs will just say you're going with your employment contract. Some jobs will, and also once again, depending on the states, they will have an at-will contract. As a advisor and a practicing dentist at one time, and also as a dentist who worked for people at the beginning of their careers, and this is very important to you, because when you do start your career, the agreement or contract that you sign can affect your future career, because as somebody mentioned and we'll discuss, that's called a restrictive covenant. That is very for new, for the new practitioner to understand what they're signing. So as an advisor, practicing dentist at one time, and just like yourselves, if you don't get a contract, it's better for you. Why is that? If you ask an attorney, they'll say you have to get a contract, because that's also what they go to school for. But a contract will never favor you, the employee, the worker, the independent contract. The contract will always favor me, the employer. It will do everything possible to protect me from you. It will also not only protect me from you while you're working for me, but it'll also then protect me from you when you leave, even if we leave on great terms, or if you decide to leave at a certain point. And we'll go over those things. So the contract will never favor you, the employee. You will have to have the ability to negotiate. And yes, every contract that you receive for any job opportunity should be 100% negotiated.
So the way that Dr. Studley said that the employer is trying to protect themselves from you. The employer's job is to get the best person they can and lose the least money over it.
Right.
So they are looking out for themselves, and your job is to look out for yourself. And in order to do that, you have to understand that when a contract is given to you, they expect some negotiation. They're not giving you the price that they want to settle on. They're giving you their low price and hoping that you're just going to say, okay. And there's nothing worse than one mistake to make is if you go into a job interview and they ask what you want to get paid and you name a number and they're like, okay, then you know that the number was too low. So you need to do a lot of preparation before you can answer a question like that. And you may have to answer the question with a question, well, what do you pay your associates or something like that?
Right, but that's why also, and we'll say this 100 times, at a job interview, you never want to get locked in because you want to see the contract. And just as an aside, but just as important, if you are at a job interview, anyone who is going to ask you to sign a contract at the time of the interview, and they might say, well, we have other people that are going to, you really should sign this right now. That's really a red flag of someone that I wouldn't want to work for, simply because what are you hiding? Like, what do you not want me to really get someone to look at? Professional practices, just so you know, you should be given at least 10 business days. So if I interviewed you today and I said, you know what, we're going to give you a contract or email you a contract tomorrow, you will have 10 days to review the contract and get back to me, with changes, yes, no, and anything else like that. And we'll also mention how to negotiate that.
We had a question, which
Sure.
is, should I start off asking for more than I'm willing to take? And yes, the answer is
Always.
definitely yes, because the same way, you're not going to wind up with the number that you throw out. That's a starting point.
Hmm.
If you say 50, they're going to say 25, and you're going to wind up at somewhere in the middle.
Right.
So you don't want to be outlandish. You don't want to turn the person off, but you do want to ask for a number that would be at the high range of what you would consider acceptable.
And someone had asked a question, well, what's acceptable?
Hmm.
And nationally speaking, this is nationally speaking, average is 150,000. Now, I will tell you, because I review contracts from all over the country, and I see some of the DSOs, the corporate dentists, depending on the locations. So if there's a location that they really need to fill, they will offer more. You have more negotiating power and that's why you need to do your homework. So if you know they have trouble filling that spot, it's far out, it's not as populated. Um, but you know what? Maybe the whole package that we'll talk about is so beneficial to you. It's worth it for you to be there for a year or two and pretty much then pay off your student loans.
But that's a really good example because they're savvy, so you're going to have to be savvy. They're going to try to get you to that remote location with
Hmm.
few patients for as little as they can pay you. They might tell you that they're going to give you some great percentage when in reality there aren't many patients there at the moment, and you're going to have to build the practice, which is
Right.
not what you're really signing up to do. So you need to know everything about the position before you can make an informed decision about whether that's a good job for you.
Right. And someone asked a question, which we might as well address, like, should I ask for a salary? And especially as a new practitioner, even after you do your residency, you're still not going to have, let's say, the speed that if you're really looking for that corporate, kind of opportunity, um, you don't have the speed that is going to be required for you to make the income that you want, that 150,000, just to pick a number. So that's why, and especially with these DSOs, you want to get that guaranteed income, the per diem, the annual guarantee, and we'll go over that, against whether it's going to be a percentage of, and the way that the DSOs are doing, they're doing it against collection, but we'll go into that. So if you are to get an employment contract or an agreement, or even you go on your interview and they say, okay, you're going to start. Well, if there's going to be something in writing, you need to know in writing when you are going to start, because you might have to relocate. You may have to find an apartment, maybe get a car. Maybe you're moving not just yourself, but also a family. So you need to, first of all, have enough time, but you also need to be guaranteed that you're going to start at a certain time. Now, that you could start working. So if you have to relocate, you want to know starting September 1st, I start working, I have a paycheck. If there is an open ended, then you have this contract, but now you're ready to get started, and all of a sudden they're like, you know what, we're not ready for you. That place is not as busy right now. And why is that important? Because if they can't start you, but you started your contract to start on a certain date, they have to start paying you. So, that's where we're trying to show you, yes, they're doing it for them, but we also have to show you that you need to then get paid.
And then
Okay.
on the flip side, I'm sure nobody who's watching tonight will be in this predicament, but sometimes dental students don't finish on time. And when that happens and you've signed a contract with a start date and you're not ready to start, there are hefty penalties.
So that's why also there are always in the contracts that, number one, if you don't get your licensure on time, or also, and we have, this is built into that, and that's to protect you guys, that if you don't get your licensure within a certain time frame, because that's not in your control,
Mm-hmm.
and that has to do with also finishing,
Mm-hmm.
then they'll be able to, delay.
Right.
So, or the company will then terminate the contract on you. But you want a start date and you want a finish date. So you want a contract that starts and ends, and you would like a 1-year renewable contract. So at times I'll see a 2-year renewable contract, 3-year, 4 years. You want a 1-year renewable contract for the simple reason that depending on the termination clauses that I'll discuss, if I have seen contracts where you may not be able to terminate the contract until after the first year the contract has renewed. So in other words, you have to work for this employer for 1 year before you can give notice to end the contract.
Which may not sound bad now, but when you're in a job that you're not happy in, or even worse, that they're asking you to, do things that you don't think are the right decisions or something like that, a year is forever.
Right. So, and we'll talk about that because there are heavy penalties if you should, let's say, give a shorter notice. And just so you know, if you break anything in the contract or the employer breaks anything in the contract, it's called a breach of contract. Okay. And you'll see that in all these different pages of your contract. But you want to know that you have a start date and a finish date, a 1-year renewable, so that you can renegotiate your contract once again at your renewable date. If it's further, you may not be able to renegotiate for 2 years or 3 years, and that's terrible. If you have to be sponsored, usually the sponsorship requires that you have a 2-year employment contract. Also, if you are going to be sponsored, please make sure that the fact that the company will be sponsoring you and paying for the expenses, the legal expenses, that must be placed in the contract with a date that when they will start the sponsorship. Unfortunately, I've seen too many of the young dentists starting out for sponsorship as well, and all of a sudden they've been working for one place for a year and they didn't even start it yet. So now that just delayed them another 2 more years. So you want that date in there. And usually I'll see it that after 1 month or 3 months, they will, start all of the immigration papers, and they have the attorney and they pay all expenses. So it's important that that's in there. We talked about being an independent contractor or an at-will employee versus an employee. I have seen at-will contracts that should really allow you, if you're an independent or an at-will employee, you're supposed to be able to make your own schedule, come and go as you please. You have total control. But that's what it looks like on paper.
There aren't many jobs like that.
Right. So you may sign an independent contract or an at-will, and the only difference that it might be is that they're not taking out taxes. Whereas an employee, they have to. But in certain states, I've seen at-will contracts where they still also take out the taxes, and you're treated almost exactly the same as an employee. So, if that does occur, important that you also meet with an accountant to go over what your tax implications are with that. Also built into your contract or agreement should be your work schedule. Because number one, you're starting, your new life. This is the next stage, moving forward. And you're planning to work, 40 hours a week, maybe 50 hours a week, 5 days a week. Maybe you're only planning to work 4 days a week. And that's what the agreement was, because you talked about it. But now you get and you're ready to start that job, and they say, you know what? You have to work 5 days a week. You had told them initially you didn't want to work the weekends. Now you have to work, maybe 1 or 2 Saturdays a month or every other Sunday. And that really wasn't what you really discussed. So hopefully you understand that point. Anything discussed is simply discussed. If it's not on paper and they're giving you this contract, you really need to have your guaranteed hours in there so that you don't relocate, you don't take a job, and now all of a sudden you thought you were only working 4 days a week and now you're working 6. So your work schedule is very important. The next part, we got a number of questions about talking about services.
Oh, before that,
Yes.
location is also important.
Right.
Because you could be working, let's say, for a DSO, and you think you're going to be working in, near where just bought a house. And then you find out that, they don't really need anyone in that particular location, but an hour and a half from where you just bought your house, they do need someone, and that's where they're putting you. So it really does make a difference about the location.
Right, putting the location. And I will tell you, I've had that happen to, clients of mine. And because of that, we actually had and discussed it and had it in writing that if they couldn't, because they had already kind of made mention that might not be a definite. And if they had to go to a further place, they were actually given money to pay for their car, gas, and tolls.
Mm-hmm.
So added an extra about $600 a month more. And they took it. And then when the other place was actually ready, they moved back there.
Mm-hmm.
But there was preparation for that. Okay. So when you do go on these job interviews and now you get a contract, hopefully you will ask on your interview, regardless whether it's a dentist interviewing you or a human resources person. Because with a lot of the DSOs, the corporates, it will be a human resources person, a recruiter that will be interviewing you. But they're also extremely versed in the job description. You should not be shy to ask, well, how many patients are going to be expected of me? If they say, well, we're going to want you to see, 40 to 50 patients a day. And you're like, I haven't seen all of that in my 4 years as a dental student. They might say, well, we're going to expect, that you're doing extractions, third molars, second molar endo as well, restore implants, minor perio surgery, all these different procedures that, guess what, maybe you are not comfortable with. So you would like to know up front, because you will see in a contract, it will state that you will perform procedures and work to the level of the American Dental Association. I have also seen in contracts that state that you will work also to the standards of the American Pediatric Dental Association. So that also is, just so you know, that means that you will be treating a lot of children in that practice.
Mm-hmm.
It does. So, you should ask them, well, what's the makeup of the patients that I'm seeing? The age group. Is it a lot of children, adults? What procedures are going to be expected of me? Are there specialists here that I could refer to? Because especially as a new dentist, and Dr. Phelps and I can just give you hours of stories of, what happened our first week out of dental school, and we're ready and we're on our own, and all of a sudden it's like, I don't want to be on my own, kind of thing.
Well, it's also, sometimes you get asked to do things that you don't think are right. So for example, one of my jobs in my first year, I worked for a dentist who said you only had to examine half of the mouth because caries is bilateral. So I gave him notice immediately and didn't come back the next day, because that wasn't the kind of dentistry that I was taught to practice or that I wanted to practice. And what you really need to remember is that you're an employee or an independent contractor, it doesn't really matter. You work for somebody. And when they ask you to do something, you're still responsible for that. So it doesn't matter that my boss told me to, just does not carry any weight anymore. You're responsible. The outcome is all on you. And if you've done something that goes against that standard of care, or something that you didn't think was the right thing to do, that's going to come back to bite you. So you always have to be practicing within the norm, and always doing what you think is right. Not necessarily what the patient thinks is right,
Right.
not necessarily what your employer thinks is right, but what you think is right. Not to say be blind to feedback from other people, obviously not. But if your stomach starts telling you that you're doing something that doesn't feel right, you're probably doing something that's not right. And on that note, I do want to remind everybody that we will be presenting again in 2 weeks, and our topic is going to be 10 guidelines to keep in mind if you get sued. So we hope it never happens to you.
Right.
But the reality is that 1 in 10 dentists get sued at some point or another in their career. And with a little preparation, you'll know that it's nothing to panic about. So we want to talk to you about it before it
Right. That's a very good one.
happens. Thank you.
When we were also in talking about in the contract and a lot of the jobs, we had gotten a question about a mentor, and mentorships in these jobs. And, these are questions that you really need to bring up at the interviews, just from all of our past reviews and just seeing how, all the students, including ourselves, have progressed through the career. Unfortunately, you may not get the mentorship on the job that you would hope for. When you take a job as, now a practicing dentist working for an employer, you're now an associate of many, and all the other associates that are there, they're working under a contract. They're working under what they have to produce. And yes, there will be some teaching, but I don't, think that you should expect this unbelievable amount of mentorship for somebody to really be teaching you how to do some of these procedures.
But a job is a perfect
It's 100% a
opportunity to
mentorship.
learn.
Right.
It's just that you may have to do some self-directed learning instead of being taught by your mentor, because your mentor, if your mentor is the person, the owner of the practice, whoever it is, they're going to be busy. They have to produce themselves. So mentorship in practice gets a little tricky.
Right. But now that should definitely be a question, that's brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Also in the contracts will be compensation, and we talked about that. And especially if it really depends, if you're working in the DSO corporate arena, you 100% should ask for a guaranteed contract. And the way I see these contracts from the DSOs, there's a guaranteed amount, and depending on average, I'm seeing between 150, 160, 165. I've seen 175. I've seen more. I've seen a little less, but it really falls within there. And you should definitely ask for a guaranteed salary. There are some that will not give you a guaranteed salary, but they will give you a guarantee for the first 6 months or the first 3 months. As a new practitioner, my advice is you want to get a guarantee, number one, for a number of reasons. Getting a guarantee for the year will let you know that that employer will have enough patients to keep you busy. That's very important. If somebody's not willing to give you a guarantee, whether it's for the year, or let's say if you're just working a day or two a week for one dentist and different dentists, you want that guarantee for the day, because then at least, once again, a little more protection for you guys. If I'm going to give you $500 guaranteed for the day, and I'm paying you 30% of collection, I know that I will give you at least $1,500 worth of dentistry to produce, so you cover that $500. Most of the contracts that I'm seeing, they're paying on collection as opposed to guarantee. You will see a term in the contract called net production. So I will, I'll review the contracts with you, and you'll say, no, Dr. Studley, I'm being paid on production. They told me that. And I was like, yes, right here on number 5. Here's the formula, and it says net production. And by the time you read the rest of that definition, it's collection. So that's why you want a guarantee for the day, a guarantee if it's a full-time job, you want a guarantee for the year, as well as, excuse me, knowing that you will not be able to make any less than that while working there. We also talk about guarantee, collection, production, and we had also discussed draw, very popular. And the draw means that I will pay you $120,000 for the year, but I'm going to do it as a draw, which means I will guarantee paying you $10,000 a month, but we're going to put the draw against collection, 30%. So that means that every 3 months, I paid you, $30,000. Now we go over your collection, and based on the 30% formula, you collected $25,000. So now you owe me, the employer, $5,000. But we'll just put it to the next pay period. Now you have to produce $10,000 more just to break even with me. So the draw, especially for a new graduate, creates anxiety. Creates anxiety for me talking about it. So I really recommend that.
For a minute, Nikki had a question, which is, let me just double check. What the heck was it? I just saw it. Sorry. Oh, about CE. Should you negotiate a budget for CE into your contract? And well, I don't think Nikki used the word negotiate, but that would be a negotiable point. So things like salary, vacation time are probably going to be higher on your list than a budget for CE. But if you can't get them to move any higher with a salary, and you're still not feeling happy about it, then you might ask for a budget for CE or some other, what they call perks that come with the job.
Right, and we'll even go over that.
We're going to talk about that.
So also in negotiating your compensation, you also need to know that the employer will make you pay part of the lab fee. So if you're doing a ceramic crown, on a patient, and the lab fee is $100, just to pick a very low number, and you're getting paid 30% on collection, you may be responsible for 30% of that $100 lab fee, which will come off of what you earn. Some places may even take off 100% of the lab fee from the employee. So if the fee is $1,000 and the lab fee is $100, they minus that from the $1,000, now it's $900. You get 30% of that on that $1,000 crown, you earn $270. I wish I was seeing people's faces when I just did that. Not that they don't understand the math, they're like, wait, I thought it was $1,000 crown. Well, that's really, how the math works with that. So they may take off for labs. If you use certain materials that they don't necessarily order, but that you want, they may charge you for that. If you use a lab that they usually use, they call them in-house labs. So if you use an outside lab and the fees are higher, they will charge you the difference. So all of these things will be in writing in your contract. Just before Dr. Peltz was answering a question, and these are things that we talk about as benefits or perks. Mm-hmm. And CE is one of them. One of the things that you should also look to negotiate especially if you are relocating, is a sign-on bonus and a moving bonus. Okay. I have negotiated contracts where they said there's none of that, and all of a sudden, there is. So please, if you're going to relocate, or if they are asking you to sign this agreement, this employment contract, and it's only April or March, then you want to make sure that ask for a sign-on bonus. And I've seen sign-on bonuses of 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, depending on where the location is. Usually with the sign-on bonuses, they give you a third up front, a third in the middle, and a third after you work the first full year.
So I'm going to interrupt because I want to remind everybody in attendance that you are going to get a $5 Starbucks gift card from us. But what we need you to do is go to the chat. You're going to see a link in the chat, and you need to click on that link and fill in whatever you need to fill in. And we will email you a gift card, a Starbucks gift card. So enjoy your venti latte on us.
Because we can't do lunch and learn.
Exactly.
52 different places.
Right.
So this also comes when you start negotiating the benefits package. Now, if you're working for a dentist and you might work for 3 different dentists within a week, 2 days here, 2 days here, 2 days here. I know I did, I know Dr. Peltz did. You still will get an agreement or something. And if you don't get anything, you need to get the something. So if you don't get anything, I recommend that you now handle the process by saying, as example, "Dear Dr. Studley, it was great interviewing with you last week. I'm really looking excited to join the Studley Dental family. Just want to go over a couple of things. Number one, you're paying me a guarantee of $500 a day against 30% collection." And then list all the different things.
The reason it's important to do that is, let's say you have a verbal agreement and a handshake. As we said, unless it's in writing, that's going to be hard. Right. It's very hard because it's your word against someone else's word. So that's all well and good. The verbal agreement, the handshake, that's fine. We're not saying you need a contract or that that's even desirable, but you do need to follow up with an email just outlining these terms as you understood them, right. Because to give the other person the benefit of the doubt, maybe you misunderstood. The worst thing is when you get ready to start your new job and you find out that you horribly misunderstood the terms of your agreement, and now you are making much less than you thought you would, or something like that. So everything has to be in writing one way or another.
Right.
And what Dr. Studley's suggesting is that you take control over this
so that
process.
You don't get them to all of a sudden get the attorney involved, and now you're going to get a 40-page document.
No, very informal. You just say, "This is what I heard today. This is what I'm expecting." Right. And then when they write back, "Yes, that's exactly what we said," now you have a contract.
Okay, that you kind of put together yourself. All right. You won't be able to do this with the corporates, but I will also go over how to negotiate with them, because it's important to negotiate. I only said that 100 times. Yeah. But you want to also look at what their benefit package is. And somebody asked, is there a retirement plan, a 401k? Malpractice insurance, disability insurance, life insurance.
CE budget.
Right, a CE. On average, especially with the corporates or a lot of the dentists that, excuse me, you work full-time for, I'm seeing on average getting about $1,500 a year towards CE credits. A lot of the corporate dental offices have their own CE courses now. So they actually make sure that any of the dentists that are working for them are getting their CE credits. So they actually have these courses that are set up for them, throughout the year. But on average, I'm seeing about $1,500 towards CE credits. Malpractice insurance, some of them may not give you the malpractice insurance, but they will give you the money to pay the malpractice insurance. It's important that you negotiate that if they're not, because if you are going to work for a corporate dental practice, malpractice insurance for them are much more expensive than if you're working for an individual dentist, because the exposure is much greater when you're working for corporate types of dental offices. Um, if you have the opportunity to get disability insurance or life insurance, the most important thing is to find out, is my insurance portable? What does portable mean? Well, maybe you got the group policy that you got from your employer, you work there for a year, and now you leave, and maybe you're not as healthy, but you can't take that insurance with you. So portable means if I have the policy and I leave this employer, can I now take the policy as my own? Some of the policies are designed that you can, but the premiums go up. Other policies, you cannot take it once you give your termination.
I want to mention that if you have any questions about these insurances that you need when you graduate, Dr. Studley is available for your questions. You just email him at insurance@drericstudley.com and he will get back to you.
So as we continue, and yes, some of them will offer you a 401k plan, but once again, make sure, because you can set up your own retirement plan if you don't put the money into your employers. And you might not have any problems when you leave if you set this own plan up that you own, especially if you know you're not going to be staying, for this employer for more than a year or two. So you might want to do that right off the bat.
We have a question.
Sure.
What types of guarantees should we look for in contracts that are for transitioning into ownership?
So, right, we have gotten a couple of questions on that.
Yeah.
If you are going to be signing a contract where the dentist says, you know what, you have an opportunity to become, you're a true associate, and if things work out, I see us being partners. That's great. Speak to all your faculty and ask them how many times they heard that when we all started our first few jobs.
I was just going to say, and aside from whether or not you could or should sign a contract like that, you really need to think about that. Even if you know this person very well. I've had situations where a student has come to me and they had said, my family dentist wants me to come in and, that's going to lead to a partnership or whatever. But being someone's patient is very different from working with them. Or even if you worked in the office as a dental assistant and now you're coming back, being a dentist in the office is very different. So until you've had some experience in that office, to think it's like getting married without having a first date, without having any dating experience with this person, which is fine. I think that works out just as well sometimes, but just know that you're going in without a lot of information about how you work together as a partnership.
So if you really are offered a true associateship with an eventual buy-in and partnership, these things have to be decided up front. Usually what I'll see, it might be a 3 to 6 month kind of honeymoon period to see if you can all live together. But then the important thing is you don't want to work for somebody for X number of years. And this happens with so many young dentists in our profession. They work for someone for 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years. And unfortunately, I recently had this to, a former student of mine. Worked for someone for 5 years, was supposed to be a partner. Every year, they're drawing up the paperwork. 5 years go by, and guess what? The older dentist let him go. And now he's been out 5 years and literally has a restrictive covenant, so he can't even work within a certain mile radius, which we'll discuss. And unfortunately, he's starting from scratch 5 years out. So if you are getting that true deal with being an associateship, but with a buy-in and a partnership, the practice needs to be evaluated at the very beginning, not years later when they say, okay, now you could buy in, and you worked for this dentist for 5 years and you tripled their gross. And now it's time for you to buy in, and you're buying in for everything that you produced. So all the money that you made, you're pretty much giving it right back to the dentist to buy into everything that you helped increase. So if you're getting a true partnership, they will draw up the paperwork right away, whether it's after the 3 month, 6 month. If you're getting strung along, and I hate to use that word, but it unfortunately does happen to the new young dentist, they just, nobody has that much difficulty getting contracts drawn up. Okay. It's very important that you get licensed in the state that you are going to be working in. You also must have your own malpractice. So any job that you have, you are not covered under that employer. You must have your own malpractice insurance. Also, when you start working for any other dentist and they accept insurance, so if they are, PPOs, and they accept Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Guardian, and Delta Dental.
And if you don't know what a PPO is,
right,
don't worry, you'll find out.
Right, we can give you we'll talk to you about that.
Uh-huh.
You need to have your own provider number. So it is also very important that you should never let anyone bill out under your own provider or license number. So if you are on an interview and this occurs, the person might say, I'm going to pay you 50% of commission. And you're like, wow, we just need to use your license number and your billing codes. All right. That is a red flag that you should run from, because there's no need for anybody to do that. But you must have your own provider code, even if you work for me as a dentist. All right. It's the law. So that's important that you get your own NPI number, your own DEA number, your own license numbers.
These terms,
right,
don't let them scare you. I mean, it's a whole other lecture, but it's all manageable. Don't worry.
Right. It will definitely, especially when you see it in a contract. So one of the things that are in a contract is how you can quit or how I can fire you. Okay, so I'm the employer, you're the employee. I could fire you, you can quit. And that's great. As the employer, we'll see in the contract, it'll state, number one, I could fire you or terminate you, is usually the word, without cause. So that just means I could wake up Monday and just say, I didn't like the color shirt that they were wearing last week, You're fired.
Or no reason at all, you're fired.
You're fired.
No cause or any cause
whatsoever. You can wake up on that Monday and say, I do not want to work for Dr. Studley anymore. And that's great. And you come in and say, I don't want to work for you anymore. And that's fine. I take out the contract and I say, okay, you have a 90-day termination clause. And you're like, I don't remember signing that. So first of all, not remembering what you signed is not, it doesn't work. It doesn't get you out of it anymore.
Did we talk about that before you sign a contract? You need a lawyer.
That we want everybody to look at it. We want advisors, and we want the right kind of attorney or advisor that is versed in this.
Because there's all this fine print and it's a different language.
Yes, like dental employment contracts are very different than an employment contract for another profession. They are. Yeah,
so you need somebody who knows how to read it, and that's not you, and it's not your parents, and it's not your partner. It's somebody who does that, on a regular basis.
So very important, because we'll talk about this in the negotiation. So usually you will see a termination clause that might say you have to give me 90-day notice. Also attached to that 90-day notice is a penalty, and it might say that if you terminate your contract short of the 90-day notice, you owe me, the employer, $500 a day. So as an example, you give me the 90-day notice, and after 30 days, you're like, I'm done. I can't stay here anymore. And you leave, and that's great. And then you get home, and in a couple of days, you get a bill from me for $30,000 with a copy of the contract that you signed. And it says that $500 a day, short of the 90 days. And these are 100% enforceable. Also, I have seen some that you cannot give notice until after 1 year of working, okay? I have seen some with penalties upwards of $1,000 to $1,500 a day. So these things, whether they sound ridiculous or not, if you do sign them, they are 100% enforceable. And I will tell you, yes, you can fight everything in a contract that you sign. You can do that, but you will have to get a lawyer. And if you're working for a corporation, let's say in Texas, but their home base is Chicago, you have to get a lawyer from Chicago that can represent you. So it's not so easy. You don't want to go into these things having to fight them. So
we have a few minutes
right.
left to talk about
we need to talk
negotiation.
about the restrictive covenant because that is so important to you guys. The restrictive covenant means, because we got a lot of questions on that.
Yes. No.
So you say that, you're going to be working for Dr. Studley Corporation. And I say, that's great. You sign the contract and it'll state, if you leave me, good terms, bad terms, in my contract, I have that you cannot work for any other dentist in a 2-mile radius or a 5-mile radius.
Or
maybe
for yourself.
Right.
You can't treat patients.
Right. In a 10-mile radius, depending if it's, very rural, 20 miles, that you cannot work for any dentist in that radius. And I could put down 2 years, 5 years, period. And if you do work for a dentist within that radius and that time frame, there's a dollar penalty in there that I could now sue you for. Or I've seen where I could take 50% of the production of all the patients that you took from me or my staff members. People will tell you it's not enforceable. Oh, that's ridiculous. Don't worry. Once again, everything that's in there that you sign is enforceable. You don't want to have to get an attorney. Your time to negotiate the contract is before you sign it. The best way for you guys to do your negotiations is to put together a really nice, concise, professional email. Always starting off with, dear doctor or dear whoever interviewed you, really excited joining the family, always positive. We'd just like to make a few changes. And that's where you'll ask for. They want to give you 500, you'll ask for 650. They'll probably settle somewhere. Mm-hmm. But we list everything. Why do I want you to do that? As opposed to getting on the phone or Skyping with them, they're very versed at negotiating.
And it needs less guts.
Yes.
And it allows you to really think everything through. So you can't, because I can't even tell you how many times, like, I've gone to name a number and suddenly the wrong number comes out of my mouth. Almost always undervaluing whatever it is that I needed to put a value on. So you don't want to be in that situation because you probably, it's much easier for you to do it via email. It's not something you're terribly skilled at, and you may be negotiating with someone who's very skilled at it. But I also wanted to say that you did say there's no better time to negotiate than that moment when you're accepting a job. So you may just be so happy to get a job. You can't even believe anyone's going to pay you to do this, finally. And you will accept any number they throw at you. Well, don't, because 6 months in, you're going to start feeling like you're not being paid enough to do what you're doing. You're going to start feeling a little disgruntled. You're going to go to your boss, and your boss is going to not be as willing to negotiate as they would have been before they have you.
Right.
Because now you're a real person with flaws in addition to all of your lovely qualities, and they're just not going to see things exactly the way that you do.
Right.
So the time to do it is when they need you and they don't have you yet. That's your moment to negotiate. When Dr. Studley mentioned the annual contract, that's important, because otherwise you're going to let a year and a half go by, 2 years, before you get up the guts to say, I need more money to do what I'm doing here. you want that to be an annual situation.
So I know this was a lot of material, and if anything, it just starts to open our eyes.
We did try to get through many of your questions.
Yes.
If there are more, if there's any way for you guys to get them to us in a way that we can respond. We've gotten this question twice now, so it's urgent. If you're a specialist endo and they ask you to bring your own files and rotary, they'll provide everything else, and it's a 60-40 collection.
Mm-hmm.
Good, or thumbs up or thumbs down?
60-40, where you, the specialist, getting the 60.
And before we
And
go,
also anything that you buy to do that is a write-off for you, because it supplies for you to be able to practice.
And before we go, I do want to announce that we have a winner
Dun,
of
dun,
a
dun, dun.
$50 Amazon gift card, and that winner is Danielle Walker from the University of Buffalo School of Dental Medicine. So please go to chat and say, yay, I'm here, so we know you were here today. And we've really enjoyed presenting to you again. We're looking forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. And again, that time in 2 weeks, what we're going to be talking about is 10 guidelines to help you if you get sued. Please share the pre-registration link. It's going to show up in the chat magically as soon as I say this. Please share that pre-registration link with your friends and send in any questions that you have. You can send them to info@doccupations.com, and we will get back to you personally. Again, if there's a public forum where we can answer questions, we're happy to do that too. So thank you so much for all being here. We really enjoyed it, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you everyone so much for joining tonight. As they mentioned, if you have any questions, you can submit them to district2as@gmail.com or through our website, and we will make sure that they get to our panelists tonight. And thank you so much for spending your Thursdays with us.
Oh, we got a message that Danielle is not here tonight, so we will have to let you know next time who the winner for today's contest was. How's that? So everybody come back, everybody. Maybe we'll get 2 next time, who knows?
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.